Over 41 million Americans claim to be of Irish descent. Our guests today, Patricia Kagerer and Laura Gordon, have chronicled the wit and wisdom of 36 Irish women on topics such as love, loyalty, and friendship. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, you have taken at least a couple of years to chronicle and pull together all of these stories, is that right?
Yes, we've been working on this project for about 2 years, actively interviewing women and collecting stories for about 18 months so that we actually started writing and focusing on getting the stories on paper.
Now, the two of you have some relationship to one another, is that correct?
Yes, we're cousins, first cousins.
Okay, great. And so how did you go about compiling all of these stories and that kind of thing? Yeah, I mean, how did you identify 36 women who would have an interesting enough story to be able to tell?
That was pretty amazing. We actually didn't really know any of these women a year and a half ago. And so I found, Lori and I decided we wanted to write this book. It's dedicated to my mother, Pat Connerton, and our grandmother, Peggy Prendergast. And we started looking for other women that had the same experiences that we had with a very important Irish upbringing as a very big focus of our life and how it helped us in our day-to-day experience and our careers as well. And so through the internet and LinkedIn, through a website called Help a Reporter Out, Haro.com, we were able to start connecting to other people.
That is truly amazing, the miracles of the internet.
Oh, yes.
Which one of these stories impacted each one of you the most? I know that's probably hard to say, but I'll ask the question.
Well, my favorite story is the story of Mary Higgins Clark. I've always been a fan of hers. She's a great writer, and she's written over 40 books, and she still writes today, and she's in her 80s. And by serendipity, Patricia was interviewing a woman who suggested we contact Mary Higgins Clark, and we were very surprised and very grateful that she was willing to be in our book. And you know, Tricia wrote her, she called me and said, you know, we need to interview Mary Higgins Clark. And I looked on the website, and Mary Higgins Clark has a tribute to her own mother and discusses her Irish upbringing. And it was almost like reaching out to us. It was a connection. Tricia wrote to her and sent an email, and we received a response. And then a couple of days later, Mrs. Clark invited us to her home. And so we were able to go to her home and actually interview her in her lovely office and spend the whole afternoon with her having tea and cookies and learning about her.
What an unforgettable experience. What impressed you about her as a person?
She truly loves what she does, and she works every day. She has an office in her home up in her attic, and she's very passionate about telling stories. And she said, you know, if people will just do what they love, find what they love, and focus on that, then that should be a goal. And so that was a really important takeaway from her.
So that it's almost kind of a little bit of a role model for what you are both entering into from the standpoint of writing and the discipline of writing and so forth.
Very much so.
Yeah.
In fact, both of us have full-time careers, and so we wrote, did the interviews and wrote this book while we're also balancing family and jobs and everything else. And one of the things that Mary Higgins Clark mentioned was that she got up every day at 5 a.m. before her kids got up. And she was a widow at the time, and she had very young children. At 5 a.m. she'd sit at her typewriter at her kitchen table and write before she would get the kids up to take them to school.
Yeah, probably an attribute of wise Irish women, that we can multitask and do lots of things. And I say we because I'm also from Irish descent, so I really relate to what you're talking about. Why did you, well, first of all, which person impacted you the most?
Every woman impacted me in some way. I learned so much from the process. One of my favorite stories, and one of the people we were also able to go meet in person, was Mary Ann McDonald. And she is from San Diego. She's a professor at the University of San Diego. And her father was of also Irish descent, and he invented the hearing aid after losing his hearing as a child. He was basically a teenager, had to go support his family because his father died. And so he got a job working as a mechanic, and he lost his hearing. He ended up inventing the hearing aid and went on to found the Zenith Company.
Wow, Zenith. Whew.
Zenith Company.
That's amazing.
So it was pretty amazing, and her whole life was devoted to, she really had she founded the Scripps Center for Alcohol Abuse in San Diego, and she was always giving back and helping others. And she was just an amazing lady and a very inspirational person. And she had a story, her story, we could have written a whole book just about Marianne. Her story was amazing.
She's
So.
dynamic, kind. She has 6 children, and she's a career woman, and she's had adversity and problems in her life, and she overcame them. And when we asked her what is one of the things she's the most proud of, she said rescuing her dogs. So really there's a human element to all these people. And one of the things that was the most gratifying, I think, is that each of these women was willing to give of themselves on a very personal level. They told stories that had some pain in them, but also had a message. And so every woman has something to say, and I think one of the most important lessons that we learned is that every woman has something to say. Everybody has a story. Everybody's had a problem or a challenge and had to overcome it. And when we bond together and learn from one another, I think it helps us in our humanity and helps us be better people and more grounded.
So you must feel pretty good about being able to bring to light these stories that you think are going to edify and inspire people. I would presume that's a real feeling of satisfaction on your part, right?
Very much so. We recognize that my grandmother, my mother, we were very fortunate to grow up with some strong role models in our family, and my relationship with them turned me into the woman I am today. But what was great was being able to connect to other women and recognize that they had similar experiences, and they all had something to share. And really it's about family, it's about values and never giving up on your dreams. Like our grandmother Peggy, who's in the book, she was 28 years old in 1928 on a farm in Ireland, and she was considered a spinster for all intensive purposes. And she didn't want to marry the farmer down the road, and she didn't want to join the convent either, so she saved her money and she came to America on her own in 1928. And so to have someone like that, and she went on to live to be 95 years old, and she was still living alone, spending her time with her grandkids. She was a true inspiration. So. And it's nice to see that other people had similar stories, and knowing the value of family, knowing the value of working hard, but never giving up on your passion and your dreams is really what we learned through this whole process.
Well, that's exciting. What was the impetus that made you go from this great idea to actually making it happen? Because a lot of us have these great ideas about the book we want to write or what have you, but very few of us actually end up doing it. So what bridged that gap there for you guys?
Tricia and I were on vacation actually together, and we were sitting around the table talking about the fact that we lost my father and her mother in the same year. They died suddenly, unexpectedly, and it was devastating. And really, we were grief-stricken. We were very, very sad because we missed them, and we wanted to honor them and honor their teachings and their instruction, and we were valuing their lessons. And we were talking about it, and we thought, you know what? We ought to do something to honor them. And our grandmother was a great inspiration. She was positive till the day she died, and so we started to talk about how could we do this, and one of the ways we could do it was by telling their story. But we also realized that it's a little bit limiting to just talk about her mother and my grandmother, so we
As
thought,
much as you love them.
yes, we thought, well, okay, maybe we need to expand the topic a little bit, and Tricia literally got the idea of just emailing Jane Tracy, who is the celebrity host on QVC, and I think she was the start of our sort of the journey. Because one woman led to another. Jane Tracy, literally Tricia, I think, got up at 5 in the morning, emailed her, and Jane Tracy answered. So it was really amazing.
That a lot of serendipitous occurrences there. And so why did Jane Tracy respond to you? Did she say?
She did. She said that she was extremely close to her mother. And so I wrote, the email I wrote was talking about how I wanted to write a book that was dedicated to my mother and my grandmother and my connection to them. And I mentioned how I had lost my mother recently. And her mother had passed away, I believe it was 18 years prior, but she still felt just as connected as I did to mine. And she said that the email spoke to her, and that she had always wanted to find a way to honor her mother, and this was a way to do that. She thought it was just a great project, and she wanted to be involved in it.
That's wonderful. Very exciting. Women supporting other women and having a common vision there.
And you mentioned serendipity. We have continually said, oh my goodness, that this is a little miracle. I mean, we have focused on the positive. One woman led to another. One woman said, oh, call so-and-so and contact this lady. And every time the women that we reached out to were willing to speak to us and respond. So
very generous with their time.
Absolutely.
And so forth.
Generous, and we followed up with them and had to ask additional questions. And every single time the women were willing to tell their story. And so that's been very gratifying. We've had a lot of adventures.
Now, what were some of the stories where that women had to overcome some tremendous adversity? Does anyone stand out to you?
Sally Miller is a woman who was involved in a terrible car accident, and she ended up moving to Ireland to recover. And
usually it's the other way around.
Exactly. And she was young and was in her 20s and was an emergency room nurse, and she loved her job and was passionate about it, and all of a sudden she was in this accident where she needed to rethink her life and refocus on it. And so she moved to Ireland and ended up repurposing and becoming a physical therapist and working with patients who were cancer sufferers. And she's ended up creating a whole line of cosmetics and creams and products that help people who are suffering from cancer. And she's a great inspiration. She's got a whole line. But there's several women.
Fascinating.
It is. There's several women, and not everyone's famous, and not everyone is well known, but each of them is unique in their own way.
Now, you probably interviewed more than 35 women. How did you decide, was it 38?
36,
yeah.
yes.
How did you decide which stories to include and that kind of thing? That must have been difficult.
Well, we did interview a few more. I think as we got better at the interviewing process, like Lori mentioned earlier, everyone has a story. And so, and I think part of the joy of the book was giving people a voice and letting these women know that through your stories, like one of the questions that they would say, well, why would you want to interview me? Or I'm not sure if I'd, but once you start talking to people, it's amazing what women have gone through on their journey of life, whether it be for this generation or the generations before. One of the themes also that I thought was really interesting is the recession. Everyone's so worried about the recession today, but when we talk to some of the women that had older influences from their grandparents, they're like, you don't know what a recession is.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a common theme as well.
And so are they referring to depression, the Great Depression,
The Great
or
Depression.
the potato famine in Ireland? I mean, or all of the above? Or?
All of the, actually, there's some stories of ancestors having to come over through America and Canada because of the potato famine. Also, just as recent, quite frankly, Ireland has always had a history of having to have people leave.
It is interesting, isn't it?
It is, it's
Yeah.
struggle.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's unique about our book is that we have women from all over the world and also from all different ages. So we have some older women, one woman, I think the oldest lady's in her late 80s, maybe her 94.
Yes.
And then we
Janet
have
Stevenson.
some children, some teenagers from Hawaii who have started bringing Irish dance to Hawaii, and they help deaf children because the deaf children can feel the rhythm of the Irish dance.
Right.
So they reach out to spread the word about the Irish dance to a community that you wouldn't necessarily think would pick up on that. But their whole focus is in giving back, and they actually live in Hawaii. So it's been very unique in that respect because the women were from all over. Some women have had struggles in their careers. Some women have had to overcome business challenges. And every one of them has sort of regrouped and sort of looked at it and said, okay, I can fix this, I can go on. And maybe it means finding a new career path or repurposing their job or coming up with a new passion.
Now, did you find that there were 3 or 4 or 5 underlying characteristics that were common amongst the women, or
persistence and resilience.
persistence and resilience? Huh?
Yes, I think every one of them is tough, independent, very focused. Without exception, they are going to tackle a problem and not quit, not give up, and they're going to be resilient. And we all have those problems, and every single one of us has a challenge. And that's why when Tricia said everybody has a story, we mean it. And so it doesn't have to be a focus on celebrities, and we don't have to focus on just people who are well known. In fact, we found that by writing this book, we are inspired to even write another book. And we have wise Texas women in mind, and maybe wise Hispanic women.
There are a lot of wise Texas women out there, and Hispanic women as well. Sure.
And there's a lot of wise women,
Sure.
and everybody has the story. So we're going to work on that, and that's something that we think is really important. And the other thing that we've learned is everybody values education. They value focusing on getting ahead and valuing your education. Our grandmother and Tricia's aunt and my father considered an education a gift and a priority. Their goal was to make sure that all their grandchildren had college degrees and were able to support themselves. And we're lucky that they were able to do that and help us do that. And so one of the things we're going to do is we've created a foundation that will allow us to support other women of all connections, not just Irish. And we're going to give $1 from every book that's sold into this foundation, and we're going to use it to set up some scholarships and support children's charities. So we hope that that'll actually give back a little
Sure.
bit.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, were there any spiritual themes that you found? Most of the women, did faith play a role a very big role in their lives?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a repeated theme. That is important. In fact, many women talked about how they felt the presence of God during their darkest hours, and when they were struggling, they often turned to faith as a source of strength and support. And I think that that's been something that we've experienced as well. We feel like there were miracles that we experienced.
What kind of miracles?
Well,
I love miracle stories.
and it's funny because I think that I look for miracles all the time, and I think that even a little thing can be a miracle.
Absolutely.
And when you say thank you, it's the little miracles are like being in the right place at the right time and getting a phone call that says, oh yes, one of your wise women is willing to speak to you today, and we happen to be in the same city with them and can set up the interview. Or we'll run into somebody and meet them, and they'll say, you know what, my sister is an editor at the Denver Post, so give me a copy of your book and I'll send it to her. So little things like that have just touched us, where we feel like we're being able to get our message out just sort of with ways beyond our control.
Right, yeah. There's an unseen force propelling you forward. Now, Patricia, you have some personal stories in the book, is that right? About your family and that sort of thing?
Yes.
And
I write.
What's the most impactful one for you about your grandmother and so forth?
Actually, the story about my mom was very personal. And in fact, she lost a baby when I was a child. So I was very young, probably about 10 years old, 8 years old actually. And my mom was pregnant and lost the baby, and it was a very tough time for her. But recognizing what she went through. When I lost my mother, she got very sick very suddenly, and it was completely unexpected. And having had a grandmother who lived to be 95, I just assumed my mother was going to be with me a lot longer.
Sure.
That memory of the strength and resilience that my mother showed me when I was just 8 years old, how she recognized I have 2 other children and I need to get up and get going. And
So she was very depressed in her own grief, though. You still
Yes.
made somehow. How did she make that impression on you? What was it?
Well, basically, she after she lost the baby, she came home, and for a few days, my mother was someone who never sat down. She was always working, always busy, always here and there and yonder. And so when she came home from the hospital without the baby, she was just ill, and I thought she was sick, but it was grief.
Sure.
Of course, I didn't figure that out till later in life. So I would take care of her. I would bring her tea, and I'd cover her up with my Afghan, and I'd bring her my babies and my stuffed animals. And this went on for about 4 or 5 days. And then one day she got up and was dressed, and Mom was back. There's no other way to say it. As I got older and we talked about it, she said she could have just lay on that couch and taken pain pills for the rest of her life because she didn't want to feel it. She didn't want to feel what happened. But she recognized that whatever God gives you, you have to get through it. And when you go through it,
You get better.
you get better. So
You can either get bitter or get better,
and
is
my
what I
mom,
say.
and
Yeah.
she
You're
wasn't
absolutely
bitter,
right.
and she went on. She went on to have another baby, and my sister Peggy was born. But so when I lost my mother, I was heartbroken, and I had all this grief, and I'd get up and get dressed and go to work every day, and I just didn't feel the same inside. But I recognized through that story and through that storytelling that was a way. She gave me a gift because I knew I had to get through this. I knew she was still with me. She's still with me every day. She's just not physically here, but she's in my heart.
Sure.
And she's just a presence like that, and unconditional love like that doesn't go away. It just continues on in a different form.
Right. Well, that must have been an incredible time for you as an 8-year-old, so concerned about your mom, and that beautiful instinct, to just love and comfort and be there for her. That's a beautiful story, very powerful. So both of you are very dynamic professional women in your own right. What do you do professionally, and how has this impacted what you do professionally, or has it?
I'm a deputy city attorney for the city of El Paso, and I've worked as a lawyer for my entire career and been in public service and government service. I think that we all, like I said, we all have our ups and downs and our own stories and our own challenges. I think knowing that other women go through it and sort of reaching out to other women has been very emotionally satisfying, emotionally gratifying. So I think that it's made me a more contented person, because I feel like, hey, if they've done it, I can do it. And when I face my everyday challenges, I think that that's there in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm. And I work for CF Jordan Construction Company. I've been there 10 years, and I've been in safety and risk management my whole career.
So you're the vice president of...
Yes, I'm the vice president of risk management.
That's kind of a male-dominated industry, isn't it?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I attribute to the ability to make it in a man's world to the things I learned from my mom and my grandmother, and that resilience and that ability to take on challenges and move forward. And it's been a blessing. It's also, there aren't that many women in the construction industry. My goal is to bring more women into the construction industry, to recognize that there's an amazing career, and we need that different way of thinking sometimes in that industry. But as far as my career is concerned, it's opened, it's furthered our relationship as cousins. We spent a lot of time together doing this, and then every single woman I met through this process, I feel like, brought me a gift. They gave us the gift of their stories, and they entrusted us with their story, and so that just to me was such an amazing gift. And so
They become friends,
and
really.
they become friends and very much a support system.
That's exciting.
And
too.
some of them I've contacted, and I said, I haven't met you, but I feel like I know you. And one woman, one of our Wise Irish women, is now expecting her second baby. And I feel a lot of joy for her, because I know the story that she had a baby that her son became very ill. And Joanna Vargas is in our book, and she had to struggle with her son's illness, and that helped her make some significant career decisions. Now she's expecting a little girl, and so we get a lot of kind of connections going forward from that. So that's been great.
That is something that I think people don't realize, that relationships we will take with us into eternity.
Absolutely.
That, you know, and so these are going to be friends forever.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing, a wonderful gift, as you say. In terms of our viewers who are watching this show, would you say that God imparts particular character attributes more powerfully to particular races of people, particularly the Irish people, that each race kind of has a distinguishing personality characteristic, or you're prepared to say that yet? That's kind of a broad question.
Yeah. I think that we have found that the Irish are particularly strong, resilient people, and the women are sort of the backbone of the families. And so we've focused on the Irish women right now, but like we said earlier, we feel like there are stories all over, and we honestly believe that God supports us all and gives us all gifts, and so we're intending to go forward and focus on more positive stories, because we think it's something that we can all benefit from, and it is actually something that's good for us. We've received a gift as well, so we're just going to go where the journey takes us, and we're hoping that God will lead us in a path that will help us to help other people. So,
Ladies, it has been such a pleasure to have you here and to hear about these very inspiring stories that you have unearthed for all of our benefits.
well, thank you.
very much for having us.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. And make sure that you look for their book on the website that is posted on the screen. Have you somehow been inspired by hearing about the stories of wise Irish women? Perhaps today's show has prompted you to investigate more fully your own heritage and to appreciate your own background. Let us know what you discover on the social media. Thank you so much for watching.